Hello everyone, welcome back to Trek-A-Day. Wanted to come on here and just do sort of a casual chat video, just kind of a catch up on the channel and life and whatever. Just thought that would be something a little different, a little more fun, and have a little bit of time to do something like this. This weekend, a few questions I wanted to answer as well. Some people talked about it when I mentioned on the community page that I had was going to be doing a video like this. Start off more with, I guess, a combination of life in the channel. If anyone who's new, thank you, welcome aboard. I've noticed a lot more subscribers in the past month or so that have been joining us. The channel is approaching very slowly towards 1,000 videos, so there's tons of stuff in the backlog to watch no matter what you enjoy in relation to Star Trek. And my real goal with this channel is to just sort of reach out to other people that love Star Trek a little bit every day, whether it's something that's part of a big video project, an individual video, just sharing a photo, something small on the community page, polls, whatever, just to bring a little bit of Star Trek into your life every day, because it's something that I think about on a daily basis, and I've been having a lot of fun since I've been doing this channel. The one thing that some people who have been following for a long time maybe have noticed is that in the past few months it has definitely leaned more towards the smaller release type stuff, polls and stuff on the community page, comments and individual photos, and fewer videos and long video projects. And it's going to go through phases like that with the channel, especially because, for me, I just started recently a second job, so I've been working double full-time hours recently, and it just has been not as big of a priority as much as I love doing this channel and having fun with it. Just have not had the time to do a lot of video stuff, and I realize too that sometimes if you don't do a lot of content, it's hard to realize how much time some of the stuff takes. Even the real short little book review videos or whatever, sometimes those can take 30, 40, 50 minutes to an hour depending on how long it is, and the editing and rendering and everything, just that whole process. And then much longer projects like my favorite characters, that was spending an hour or so here or there for months. My top 100 episodes of Star Trek, which was this massive thing I did for the channel, that was taking on a part-time job for a month. That was crazy amount of work. I just don't have time for something like that right now, and I still want to still be in tune with what I want to do with this channel. And I've been very happy seeing a lot of the interaction and comments, and some familiar names, some new names on a lot of that kind of stuff, and bring up different conversations with Star Trek on the community page. I've been very happy with how that's been working out, but that's kind of where I'm at, why it shifted temporarily more towards that type of content. The type of content will change as time goes by. That's why it's been focused there, because I've just been so busy that the longer video type format stuff, especially stuff that's very editing heavy, things with lots of pictures and images, I just haven't had time for stuff like that. But I've been happy with how that's been going, and hope you have been enjoying that as well, and appreciating the idea behind the channel. And the other thing too is that this is a channel that is entirely just kind of a fun hobby. I don't make a penny off this channel. I know occasionally there's advertisements on videos for this channel, but I don't see any of that. That just goes to YouTube. This channel, isn't monetized in any form. It's not even to the level where, with the watch time and number of subscribers and stuff, I couldn't even apply for that if I wanted to. So yeah, it's just sort of a fun kind of hobby, and I'm glad for the people that I've been able to meet and talk to and bounce ideas off of, and see people of different age groups and demographics and different levels of experience with Star Trek, and being at different points in the experience. That's been a lot of fun to see, especially outside of stuff such as message boards and things that I have not been involved in decades, really, with that aspect of Star Trek. So it's been fun to see that, and looking forward to the next season of Strange New Worlds coming out. Still a little worried it's not going to be super great. Strange New Worlds, I've talked about a little bit, and maybe I'll get more into it at some point, but it's one of those shows that is a little frustrating for me, because there are elements of it that I absolutely love, and especially with the change in the course of the tone and the style in comparison to being very disappointed with the direction of Discovery, seeing it feel much more like a return to form for Star Trek. I've been loving a lot of stuff with Strange New Worlds, but then there are aspects of it that I genuinely dislike, because it's kind of been mixed, and it's also a combination of where television production is. just in general, like beyond that, beyond dealing with COVID, beyond dealing with strikes, just the general form as we're in the streaming age, shows have huge breaks in between seasons, and the seasons themselves are very, very short, and you end up with shows that after 4 or 5 years have fewer episodes than what used to be in a single season of a TV show in previous decades. I watch a lot of older television. The 60s is one of my favorite decades ever, and most of those shows, even bigger budget, really high quality shows, were averaging 25 to 30 episodes, and sitcoms and things were pretty frequently going over 30. And then enter the era where I grew up, and it was more common for 20 to 26. Then it kind of became 20. Now it's more like 10, and it's not even every year. And part of my frustration with that is that there's not an appropriate then uptick in quality or consistency. Because if you have a show with 24 episodes in a season, and like 15 of them are fantastic, 5 are pretty good, and there's like 4 like not one of my favorites, I'm kind of a dud or whatever, that's still more good quality episodes in a single year than a lot of these modern shows are having in 3, 4, or 5 years, just because of that same ratio is still applying. Even shows that I really like even some of the modern Star Treks I like more than others, but even the ones that I really like, the episode counts are so small, and it's so much time in between, that when there's like 1 or 2 or 3, whatever episodes here or there that I'm not quite fond of, it ends up being like 5 to 10 episodes I really love over the course of several years, and it feels like the quality overall of television has gone down along with the quantity, and having both at once is just a very strange thing. So again, my hopes are not super high for Stranger World Season 3, but I really have fingers crossed hope that I'm going to be surprised. It's always what I hope whenever something new for Star Trek comes out. That's my biggest hope, is that no matter what my expectations are, whether they're good, whether I'm really excited, or whether I'm a little bit, I kind of want to see where it's at. If I'm not quite certain, I always want it to be better than I'm expecting to be a big surprise. I had to pause there for a second. Might have to in a little bit. One of my neighbors down the street is installing new speakers in his car, and he's testing them out to make sure they're working. So there's like crazy music for like 30 seconds, and then it goes down as he's testing things out. Like, come on. Frustrating. But anyway, it's also where I'm at with the mindset for Academy. There are some things about it that have me a little worried. There's some things about it that, like, okay, maybe this could work. And there's a rumor at this point, who knows, about another animated series. We'll see what that entails. Maybe it is secretly something related to Lower Decks. I doubt Prodigy. Netflix has not renewed their interest in that, and I feel like, as amazing as the setup for another season of that was, as being a show, like, it was really, if you haven't watched season 2 of Prodigy, it's actually really good, especially for something that's more targeted towards kids. It is a decent Star Trek show in its own right, and was building towards a 3rd season that was going to be potentially all about just exploration and very traditional Star Trek concepts, and it's sad that that is very likely dead. I seriously doubt we're going to see more of Prodigy. I don't know what's on the horizon for Star Trek. And I've said it before that there are some things on the horizon that could potentially be good, but I really think that Star Trek is at a spot right now where it kind of needs to wrap up this era, come to a closure, have a little bit of some downtime again, and come back with something fresh in a new era, with something along the lines of like a legacy concept, continuing Star Trek, onwards. But we'll see where things go. Maybe things will turn around and be like fantastic soon. And then for Legacy Trek, older stuff, I'm watching kind of the usual stuff like every show that I watch, although I was talking before on the community page, I'd love to hear how some of your viewing habits have changed over time, because for me, I've been watching Enterprise and TOS a lot more than I used to. Growing up and all the way through my whole life, Deep Space Nine is my favorite, then TNG, then Voyager, and I've always kind of watched those the most, as much as I loved TOS. And Enterprise, my appreciation grew. I liked it, but I like it more over time, looking back. And I think part of that is the comparison to newer Trek. Enterprise looks even better than it already was, better than I think its reputation was, especially that season 4. But for some reason, I've just gone through a phase of really the past 5 or 6 years watching more frequently very classic Trek, like a lot more TOS than I used to. And I think Enterprise, it's more because of the time frame and the styling of it, where that's sort of been an extension of me watching more TOS recently. And there hasn't really been a specific reason why. It's just sort of, for some reason, I've been more in the mood for that kind and style of Star Trek more in more recent years. And I have been reading a ton of Star Trek books recently. I'm always reading Star Trek books, but I read a lot of other stuff, especially nonfiction. A lot of history and archaeology is really an area that I really enjoy, and other forms of fiction as well. But lately, I've just been reading a lot of Star Trek books because I've been going back and rereading certain ones that I maybe read 20, 30 years ago, especially when I was much younger, and it's interesting going back to them and rereading them being much older, especially some of the ones that I maybe was legitimately a kid, like 10, 12 years old when I read it, and it's having a different perspective than reading it at almost 40. So that has been a lot of fun, going back and reading those and catching up with some newer ones, like the new Strange New Worlds that just came out. So I've been reading a lot more Star Trek too. It's been a larger portion of what I've been reading lately, just so much that I've been feeling like getting in the mood and reading. And I think part of that too also comes from Star Trek is very much a comfort thing for me, and being so much busier right now, and even though I like both things that I'm doing, there is a level of stress when you're working so much, and it's been nice to come to those and as a way of relaxing my mind and still being mentally engaged with something at the same time, not being just completely passive and watching some trash on TV. That's been a way of doing that. So I've been also reading a lot of Star Trek, and that's partially why there's been a lot of Star Trek book reviews lately. One, I've been wanting to do a lot. There's been a lot kind of in the backlog. Some of those were even filmed months and months ago. Who knows, some of these videos, they kind of stay and come out much later on, and I filmed a whole bunch of those with some older books that I remembered very vividly, and then as I've been rereading a lot of older ones, kind of talking about them, so I've been really enjoying that. And I think it's a huge, important part of Star Trek, the franchise, not only because there are hundreds upon hundreds of amazing little individual adventures that take place during the course of the shows, but of the 15 years or so of stuff that continues everything post Nemesis, and you really get to see what happened to those characters. And it's such a huge chunk of Star Trek outside of the shows that I really enjoy getting into the book side of Star Trek. Looking forward to some of those action figure lines. I think there's been a combination of production and uncertainties with tariff situations and things that I really feel like some of those have been pushed back a little bit. There's been a little bit of lack of clarity on exactly when certain things are coming up, but some stuff's been coming up for pre-orders, and we'll see how that's going. So I'm really excited for finally a new, good looking, it appears to be so far, a couple of waves of Star Trek action figures coming from different companies that aren't the $400 museum quality pieces or complete trash that ends up looking lower quality in the old Playmates toys and Walmarts and things. Star Trek has had a hard time for a long time, since the end of Enterprise, really gearing into that same level and that kind of middle ground of Star Trek merchandise and toys and things. And it's been an odd thing for me experiencing, because I grew up during the time where I just kind of expected to walk into any bookstore or toy store or whatever and see a whole section of Star Trek stuff every single time I went in. That was kind of my experience growing up, was legitimately monthly there was bare minimum one new Star Trek thing on a shelf somewhere, bare minimum, usually a lot more, whole lines of action figures and toys, novels, comics, books, coloring books, video games. Every Scholastic magazine when I was in elementary school, I was buying Star Trek stuff at school. It was just everywhere. So I'm glad to see at least a little bit more of quality come out, and something that's more that middle ground, and seeing some characters that have not had that representation before. Stuff like having a real Nog action figure come out, and I have high hopes for some of that stuff in the future, seeing how the interesting choices they're making. Then I guess the last thing I really want to talk about is some questions that some people had that maybe weren't answered in other videos, or just kind of keep the general chat thing. And I'd love to hear anything you want to say below. Respond to anything I'm talking about, stuff you like or dislike about the channel. I'd love to hear what's going on with you and as how you've been experiencing Star Trek recently. If you've been reading any good books. Again, have your viewing habits changed, or are you just starting a show you maybe never watched before, maybe you skipped it, or just maybe have never gotten to it before? I'd love to hear that. And last thing, I wanted to answer a handful of questions I got on a couple of different community page things, since I said I was going to be filming more of a kind of casual video over the weekend talking about Star Trek. And one question was, do I listen to any Star Trek podcasts? And I do occasionally tune in to different ones that pop up as suggested to me on YouTube. I tend to especially pay attention and look at ones that have very few views and subscribers, kind of curious to see more of the smaller channel. Like, that's kind of how I view a lot of YouTube stuff too. I'm more interested instead of the big popular, sometimes corporate, sometimes individual, whatever channels. I like looking at and getting to experience the more kind of smaller scale channel type stuff. So look at those. The only thing I listen to regularly though is the Decon Chamber. That I will definitely watch all the time. There's a few more that I do tune into occasionally, but that's the one that I pretty much never miss. That's the only one there. Another more in-depth one was my favorite episode of every Star Trek series, and if you're interested in that aspect and my overall thoughts of Star Trek, again, I always say the reason why I did that huge 100 favorite episodes of Star Trek series was because that gave me a chance to really go in depth and explain and explore my connection to Star Trek, what my favorites are. It kind of covers my journey through Star Trek. It's really a series that is kind of a catch-all of every aspect of who I am as a Trekkie and kind of what this channel's about, and it just kind of, for me, really encompasses the whole picture. So it's the number one thing. That's why I suggest all the time for people to work their way through that series, because that's why I did that so early in the lifespan of this channel as well, is because I felt like that was just a great launching pad to the entire concept of, what this channel is about. So check that out, but I'll go through and I'll mention those, and especially because I'll mention some stuff, some of the newer shows that didn't make it onto there. So starting with TOS, there are definitely some of those episodes that I really love, like Mirror Mirror and Sitting on the Edge Forever. I think it's probably my pick for like the best, but the Doomsday Machine has always really been up there as one of my favorites, and I think has become my favorite over time episode of TOS. TNG, Best of Both Worlds. I mean, that is hard to top for me just in general, because it's my first memory of Star Trek, and it's just been so impactful that I just really love that. Deep Space Nine, if you watched the video, Trials and Tribulations, not even just my favorite episode of Deep Space Nine. I don't consider it the best episode of Deep Space Nine, but it is my favorite. It's actually my favorite episode of all of Star Trek, and I can go in depth talking about why that is, but I love that particular episode. Voyager's Deadlock. I've always said that that's kind of an odd choice. I don't think very many people would pick that as their favorite, but I really enjoy that. Enterprise, In a Mirror Darkly, no contest. That is just by far my favorite episode of Enterprise. Discovery, favorite episode of Discovery. I'm going to have to go to one of the related short treks. The Brightest Star, I really like that, because otherwise I can't pick a favorite episode of Discovery. It's not going to happen, but that's the closest I get. I really like that. I think that was genuinely good, that short trek, and it's very related to Discovery. Picard, The Last Generation, if I had to pick an episode. The last couple are harder, because they're newer. Some of the newer shows are harder because I haven't had as much time to sit with them as some of these other shows. It's been 10, 20, 30 plus years to really kind of solidify what are my favorites, and over time, and the new shows not quite as much. Strange New Worlds, I really like Children of the Comet. That's kind of a favorite of mine because it feels like a very traditional Star Trek and kind of what I wanted from a show like Strange New Worlds. I also really liked Under the Cloak of War, but if I had to pick an absolute favorite, it's going to be between Children of the Comet and Those Old Scientists. Those Old Scientists, I was very shocked with how much I enjoyed it. That crossover with Lower Decks, and part of what I really liked about it is that it took Lower Decks, which to me has its moments. I've talked about this, and weirdly, if you're not going to know what I'm talking about if you don't know the show Lex. Amanda, my wife, and I were watching Lex, and it was a show I really enjoy, and she always had that point where, like, the style of humor in that show where she's actually enjoying the episode, and then the type of humor of that show just reached this point of absurdity where I could see her souring on it, where it just went too far. She's like, they just dialed it back. I would actually like this. And that's always what I feel about with Lower Decks. I really like a lot of the ideas behind it, a lot of the passion for Star Trek and the fandom behind it. But when that I don't like that like Rick and Morty type humor. I don't like that aspect of that animated series at all. So sometimes it really, really works for me, and sometimes that stuff creeps in a little bit too much and goes too far, and then so it's kind of like a mixed bag where the parts of it I love, parts of it I really don't like. And this crossover, pushing them into live action, having to interact with the crew of Strange New Worlds, I think forced the style of humor of Lower Decks to be tuned down a bit, to be curtailed, and to be pulled back to work better in a live action scenario and with these other casts. There's still a moment or two I didn't like in there, but overall I feel like then I finally found the humor really, really funny and worked well with the crew, and I was just very surprised at how well that crossover worked, and just found it to be very enjoyable. So it wouldn't be my pick for like the best episode, but it might be, if I'm just being a favorite, it's got to be up there. It's fun, but Children of the Comet is really one that, for me, just feels like a great traditional Trek. So it's a bit up in the air, but maybe Those Old Scientists. If I had to pick one, and it's kind of the same with Lower Decks. Lower Decks is really hard because Lower Decks, for me, there are a lot of moments with characters or parts of episodes that, again, I adore, and they're my favorite. So it's really hard, though, for me to pick an individual episode. And it's definitely going to change over time. Like right now, the Hear All, Trust Nothing, mostly just because they went to Deep Space Nine, and I'm obsessed with Deep Space Nine. That's really, if I'm being truthful, like why that's probably my favorite right now, but that's one that's definitely more likely to change over time and rewatching the series, because I haven't really gone back and done a lot of rewatching of Lower Decks, especially after the first 2 seasons I rewatched after I first got into it in anticipation of the new seasons as they're coming out. But especially the last season, I haven't really rewatched much of that yet, just a couple episodes here and there. So that's one that's very likely to change. It's very new. And the same thing with Prodigy. That one's hard. It's definitely going to be a season 2 episode, but for me, The Last Flight of the Protostar right now is probably my overall favorite if I had to pick an individual episode. So yeah, that would be my favorite episode of all the different Star Trek series. And the last thing that I wanted to address, someone was asking whether or not I have any more big video series stuff, like my favorite characters, my favorite episodes in the works for the future, and I do. Eventually, someday, I do want to get into the New Frontier series. I've talked about it very sparingly, just a little bit here and there, in relation to characters like Captain Calhoun and his action figure and being one of my favorite characters, but I really want to get into doing a video series. This is probably a little far off in the future, though. In-depth look at the entire New Frontier, like the whole thing, all the books and everything related to that. What's going to be much sooner than that, I'm hoping probably late summer, early this fall. There's no real definitive timeline or whatever, but I have been starting a rewatch of Star Trek Voyager, because if you saw, I did a trip last summer to Germany, and since then I have accumulated several German box set versions of some certain Star Treks, and of course the TNG Blu-rays. Most of them are made in Germany, and they have all the language options. They're universal, those Blu-ray sets. So I've been kind of rewatching some Star Trek slowly in German, and it's been an interesting way to kind of revisit a series that I know by heart. And as I'm doing that, I want to do sort of a brief rewatch series of certain shows. I'm starting with Voyager and going through that, and I have to kind of decide how I want to go about doing it. I think what I'm going to do is, so it's not literally, I can't decide, maybe you can help me decide, because I don't want it to be a crazy year-long, that's all I'm doing project, which is what it would turn into if I did an in-depth review of every episode as I went for all 7 seasons. That would be this channel for a year if I did that with the amount of work. So I'm trying to decide if I want to do still the episode by episode, but very brief, little 2-minute discussions, just kind of talking about each episode, or if I want to make slightly longer videos talking about each season as I rewatch. I feel like, especially with the structure of this channel and how I like it to be something shorter and daily. I think I'm leaning more towards doing just very brief discussions about every episode as I go by, rather than a big in-depth thing. So I'm leaning towards that. But let me know down below if you would prefer that, or just go like full season by season. Those are longer. I feel like that's not quite in line though for me with the style of the channel. So I think I might, we'll see. So let me know down below what you think. And that's about it. I think that was the last thing that I wrote down here. That's it. So yeah, just wanted to come on here this weekend. Hope you have a great weekend. I'd love to hear what you're doing, even if it's not Trek related, of course, if you're seeing family or just hanging out or working, whatever. I want to take some time since I had it to do a nice long, just kind of casual Star Trek video like this. I hope you are having a great week. Hope your year is going well so far, and I hope having this little bit of Star Trek every day has had a positive influence.